after we had gone to sleep and said goodnight to him, he made the worst decision he could have ever made. From just doing a little bit of what he had been sold, 5 times the amount of fentanyl that would have killed him was in his body. And Colin didn't ask for fentanyl. Colin didn't want to die.
We're Rob and Liz Walker. We have lived in San Carlos for 17 years. We raised our family here. Grew up through all the schools here. They went to Heather and Terra Linda, and then Colin was at Cromwell.
Colin loves sports. From an early age, he always grabbed a baseball mitt, picked up a basketball, shot baskets, played soccer, and really excelled at just being outside playing.
He worked hard in school. Probably the most just important thing to him is he loved being funny, and he was really funny.
Welcome back to CBS News. Today, we have been facing a tragedy.
Colin loved to push himself. He would jump off the highest rock at the lake. He never wanted to settle. He always pushed himself. COVID was a big change for him. When the lockdown started, he began to spend a lot more time in his room with his door closed.
There was just something off, really off, those last 2 weeks of his life. And so that morning, got up, took him down there. It's 10 a.m. He didn't wake up before 1 p.m. most of the time on weekends, but I took him to see the doctor who we trusted. She said, he's not suicidal. And we both know that he wasn't suicidal. He felt very depressed.
It was 12 o'clock and I knew he had an appointment at 12:30, and I was about to go to my daughter's soccer game. And so I went into his room and I opened the door and he wasn't in bed. And so I went over to his brother's room next door and I said, "Do you know where Colin is?" And he said, "Dad, Colin's here." And I said, "No, Colin's not in bed." And he said, "Well, call him." So I picked my phone up and I called Colin. And I heard the phone ring in his room. And so I walked in his room and he wasn't in bed, but he had fallen out of his chair at some point that night after doing the cocaine that had a lethal amount of fentanyl, and he died. I knew as soon as I saw him that there was no trying to get him back. It had been a long time that he had been laying there. And I just started screaming.
I watched my son's body be taken out our front door in a body bag. I knew I had brought him in that door as a baby, and I saw him go out. And no family should ever have to go through that, which is why we are doing what we're doing. We can't bring our son back. We'll never know what his life was going to be. But if one kid hears this and says it is not worth it, hopefully we'll never know if this was successful or not, because we won't hear about another kid dying.
He bought a drug that was poisoned. He didn't die because he had an overdose. It's not an overdose when you weren't knowingly taking a drug that you were sold. He was poisoned. And in the end, our son was killed.
This isn't about don't do drugs, just say no. This is decades, for years, for hundreds of years, teenagers have experimented. They've been impulsive, they've taken risks. Drugs have been part of that. But now, you experiment and you can die. I hope parents talk to their kids, but I hope really that the kids that are hearing this and teenagers at the high school go, no pain is so great that a drug that you're just trying to dull that pain is worth taking. Or if you don't have mental health issues, no high or fun at a party is fun enough to die.
So welcome everyone tonight. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here. We're in the middle of a national fentanyl crisis. In 2021, 100,000 Americans died as a result of fentanyl. It is now the #1 cause of death among Americans aged 18 to 45. Mental health is closely linked with substance abuse. 83% of youth 13 to 17 are overwhelmed, and 79% say anxiety and stress is a common reason to misuse drugs and medication. This is simply unacceptable. We all need to take action right now to save lives. We're here tonight to raise awareness about the fentanyl epidemic and the mental health challenges young people are facing. To do that, we've partnered with 2 amazing individuals and organizations. Tonight, you'll hear from Ed Tiernan, who started Song for Charlie when his son died after purchasing what he thought was a Percocet on social media. And Susie Hughes, who is the Executive Director of One Life's Counseling, whose mission is to make mental health services affordable and accessible to anyone who might need them. During the presentation, we encourage you to add questions through the Slido app that you hopefully have downloaded onto your phone, and we will answer as many as we can during the Q&A. And now I'd like to hand things over to my dear friend, Ed.
Thank you, Liz and Rob, for inviting me to be part of this evening. What a powerful film, and that's the most detailed that I've heard your story, and it's we all have our own stories, but every one of them is just earth-shattering. And Susie, thanks for being here. Most of all, I want to thank all of you people. As Liz mentioned, we're here to ask for your help. We need your help. We all need to get involved directly if we're going to solve the problem that I'm about to describe to you tonight. And my job tonight, as I see it, is to make you all just as smart as you can be about what's going on, so you can then tell someone else, and they can tell someone else, and they can tell someone else. Because we're in the middle of an unprecedented epidemic. We're at the intersection of 2 new trends. The advent of very potent synthetic substances in the drug stream, and the practice of counterfeiting or hiding those substances in others without the consumer's knowledge. That's why you've got an explosion of death in America. My favorite movies start at the end and then they kind of flash back and tell you how we got here, so I'm going to start with the punchline. This is what I want you to remember, this is the takeaway. The entire inventory or supply of supposedly prescription pills that you might come across online or at a party or in the locker room or on the street, they're all fake. For economic reasons, there's no more legitimate prescription pills anywhere on the internet or on the street. They've all been forced out. We're going to talk also about cocaine and other party drugs that have been contaminated or cut with fentanyl. But prescription pills, just like there's no, some of you older parents in the room, you might kind of appreciate this comparison. You know, there's no real authentic Rolexes sold on Times Square. We all know that, right? Okay, kids, there's no Xanax on Snapchat, period. If you get a pill on Snapchat, it ain't real. And if it's not real, you know what it's made of? Fentanyl. That's the punchline. My family found this out the hard way. Just like the Walkers. My son was 22 at Santa Clara University. Early COVID, he came home for spring break, if you remember. And all the university said, don't come back. The lockdown started. He was with us for 60 days. He was doing fine. As normal as anybody could be during early COVID. He's about to graduate. He's trying to find a job. He's got stresses. I mean, Charlie was a great kid. Very smart, lots of friends. He was in love. But he also had his issues. You know, he was concerned about what his life was going to be and insecure about this. And, you know, he changed majors, kind of had a sophomore slump, you know, in college. But he was overall right in that range of normal. And on a random Thursday afternoon, after going back up to college with his friends, they all decided we got 1 month left together before we graduate and go our separate ways. Forget what the administration says, we're going back. And he goes back and moves into his fraternity house. And on a random Thursday, when his friends came and said, we are going to go out and hit some golf balls and do some day drinking, it's a beautiful day, online learning anyway, we're about to graduate, he said, I can't go, I got a job interview. And when they left, he went to some lower classmen and said, does anybody have any Xanax? I'm going to crush this video game and wait for this 5 o'clock phone call. And they said, no, the regular people aren't in town, but I know this plug on Snapchat. I went to a random guy and they got some Xanax, and Charlie, who'd had back surgery a year earlier, said, oh look, he's got Percocet too. My back's killing me, I'll take one of those while we're at it. We know that somebody walked past Charlie's room about 3 o'clock in the afternoon and waved to him and he said hi. And sometime between 3 o'clock and 5 o'clock, he put that Percocet in his mouth and he was dead in like 10 minutes, according to the doctors. He never made the 5 o'clock phone call. They found the Xanax in his room, 1 pill, and he died in his bed, game controller in his hands, chin on his chest, 22 years old. That's my story. So how did we get here? Let's do 2 things. I want to start with what the heck is fentanyl, and then we'll figure out kind of how we got to where we are today. So when you hear people talk about fentanyl, a lot of times there's a little hyperbole that goes on. I want to make clear, fentanyl is not a poison. Fentanyl is a medicine. It's a very effective medicine. If you break a bone and end up in an ambulance, the EMTs are going to give you fentanyl, and when they do, you are going to say thank you, because it works really well. Why? It's an opioid. It's a pain reliever in the class of morphine, oxycodone, which are the legal kind, and also heroin, same class of drug. The thing about fentanyl is it comes on really fast, and then it wears off really fast. And in a medical environment, that's good. So after surgeries, you don't get what they call the morphine hangover, where it takes you 5 days after you get home, you're still feeling out of it from being under. So it has a lot of good medical applications. It's carefully dosed out because it's so strong. You usually get it in an IV drip at about 1.25 micrograms per hour. is what they administer in the hospital. Now, this pharmaceutical-grade fentanyl that is used in hospitals is not what's killing people. Let's make that distinction real clear. The thing about fentanyl is it's not that hard to make. You don't need the big boilers and the heaters and the tubes like you see on Breaking Bad. You can stir up the chemical precursors or the raw materials in a 5-gallon bucket, and they do. So what's killing people is what's called illicit fentanyl, or illegally manufactured fentanyl, IMF. It's very easy to make, and it's synthetic. What does that mean? And this is a major break. It's not plant-based. So you can make as much of it as you want. If people want more of your fentanyl, you just add a night shift and you make more fentanyl. And anybody who studied high school level economics knows what happens when the supply of anything is unlimited. What happens to the price? It goes right through the floor. So fentanyl has this unique combination that's irresistible if you're a drug trafficker. It's really strong and it's really cheap. It's all profit. If you use that as your active ingredient, I say pressing pills is printing bills. It's all money. And that's why the legitimate ones are not on the street anymore. The fake ones have pushed them all out because the people who are in this business are in it for the money. One more little technical thing I'd like to make sure is clear. Dosing fentanyl is really tricky. There's this thing called the therapeutic index or the therapeutic window. Think of it like this. How much Tylenol do you have to take to get rid of your headache? 2. That's the bottom of the window down here. How much Tylenol do you have to take to die from a Tylenol overdose? You can die from an overdose of Tylenol, but it takes a lot of time. The therapeutic window with fentanyl is paper thin. It's really tricky. The difference between high and die can be 2 or 3 grains of sand in that pill or in that bag of Coke. That's all it takes to be the difference between life and death. So what is this dangerous, scary stuff doing on our streets? Just a little history lesson, real quick. There's a thing called the white market. This is the way you're supposed to get your drugs, right? They're made in a very clean, sterile pharmaceutical facility where they pay PhDs 6-figure salaries and use huge equipment to carefully make sure the exact amount of alprazolam is in your Xanax tablet and not a smidge more or less. That's an art and a science. And that's where legitimate prescription pills come from. Now, OxyContin came out, Sacklers, Purdue Pharma, opioid crisis, right? That came out in '96. And they sold it under the false pretense that it wasn't addictive, but it was. So a lot of people got addicted. And that caused this market for the diversion of legitimate pills. People writing false scripts, doctors overprescribing, people going and getting 100 pills, keeping 50 for themselves, selling 50 to their friends. That's diversion. It's illegal, but what you're taking is still legitimate medication. Then we cracked down on that, and we shut down the pill mills. And the bad guys, the drug traffickers, they knew 2 things. Number 1, there's a lot of people addicted to pills now. Number 2, this generation of kids who are turning 20, 22 now, they were born in the early 2000s. This is the generation of kids that's very familiar with pills. We've been giving them Adderall, Ritalin for learning differences, and Xanax for anxiety, and oxycodone for wisdom teeth and sports injuries. You guys are very familiar with pills, right? By the time you're in high school, you go off to college, 40% of your friends have a prescription bottle in their backpack. It's normal. Bad guys know this. So they say, if we can't get the real ones, and the real ones have gotten real expensive, let's get some fentanyl and some stamps that look just like the real markings of Oxy and Xanax and Vicodin, and let's press these pills ourselves, and we'll make bank. And there's this wonderful thing called social media. The kids are all over that. Let's go advertise our pills on social media. So that's why you got these dealers, putting menus up on Instagram saying, "Come get your Oxy." I got 30 milligram Oxy here. It's got an M on one side and a 30 on the other. That's not Oxy. That's what we call a Fentapill. So this new kind of dynamic that's going on here, big picture stuff, for our entire history as a species, we have cultivated the earth, and we've used the plants, and we've figured out how to take advantage of their medicinal properties, their nutritional properties for our food, and their euphoric properties for our celebrations. For bazillions of years. That's changed. The drugs that are emerging now, and fentanyl is the first of new ones that are going to be coming, believe me. The new business model is to go to synthetics because you can make as much as you need. So the whole landscape of the drug world has experienced a massive earthquake. The shift from the farm to the lab is a game changer, and it's not going away anytime soon. And when I was growing up, if you wanted to get some cocaine, the concern was by the time it got to me, it would have been stepped on so many times that it would be weaker. Because the business model was the pure cocaine came from Colombia and it made it all the way up to my campus. By the time it got there, to make money, they would cut the good stuff back with inert filler. And it would be weaker by the time. My risk was I'd get ripped off. The new business model with synthetics is find the most powerful raw material you can find and extend your batch yield. Right? This much fentanyl is as many doses as a kilo of heroin. So when you spread this much fentanyl and put it in a blender of dry powder with other inert filler, and you're going to press out 10,000 pills, you cannot get the dosing consistent from pill to pill. You can't do it. You're going to have some duds, you're going to have some that work, and you're going to have some that are deadly. And that's just not going to change. And they don't care. Because the people making the fentanyl and pressing the pills, that stuff's changed hands 8 times before it gets to you. They know some people are going to die. To think that they care that kids are dying from what they're doing is kind of naive. It's just a cost of doing business. They're making so much money. They've already put the money in the bank. All right, so what's the result? Young people are dying from this at overwhelmingly disproportionate numbers. Okay? So what do we tell kids? We tell kids, stay away from really dangerous drugs like meth, benzos, cocaine, heroin. But that's not what's killing kids lately, is it? Fentanyl. Between 15 and 24, high school and college age kids in 2020, I think this is, right? 7,100 roughly died from drugs, and of those, 5,400 were fentanyl. 76% of all people this age who die of drug of any kind, it's fentanyl that's killing them. This is not a somewhere, someday problem. This is a right here, right now problem. The problem is kids don't know it, and that's what we're about to change. That's what we need your help with. We did a survey, market research, and this is what the kids told us. First of all, students, you're overwhelmed. This is self-reported. 86% of people in this age group, under 24, 15 to 24, answered the question, how are you feeling? I'm overwhelmed. I'm not really comfortable talking about it. And if I was going to take a pill off a prescription, the reason would be to self-medicate. So you're getting a lot more self-medication deaths than party deaths. That's kind of new too. These are not people overdosing on alcohol at a fraternity party. These are people dying at home in their own bed like Charlie and Colin, trying to take the edge off, trying to feel better. And they don't know enough about fentanyl. I mean, almost 25% of them, when they said, tell us how dangerous fentanyl, they couldn't answer the question. They didn't know enough about it. That's what we need your help to change. I like to show this slide to make a couple of points. The headlines are that over 100,000 people a year are dying from drug-related causes in the United States now. 70% of those are fentanyl, of all ages. So make no mistake, fentanyl is driving the drug death epidemic that we're facing right now. Fentanyl is the root cause. It's in heroin, it's in cocaine, it's in Molly, and it's in prescription pills. So look at the age distribution here. Okay? Fentanyl involvement. As people get older, they die of other stuff. The younger they are, the more likely fentanyl is to be involved in the death. Look at the cocaine deaths. Young people like Colin who intend to take cocaine are dying, and they're not dying from cocaine. They're dying from the fentanyl in the cocaine. The way this stuff is reported is, the toxicology report comes back, it's a polysubstance death because it's after the fact, and they record whatever substances are present. And when there's cocaine present after that person dies, in this age group, 85% of the time, there's also fentanyl present. That's a big number. Fentanyl is in cocaine. Make no mistake, that's the fastest growing kind of category of casualty that we're starting to see, is the cocaine. So, again, another history lesson. You know, when I was growing up, the point I want to make here is it's time for us to change the way we talk about drugs in America. Because it's completely changed. And the old narrative has to catch up. In the old days, the story was, well, you're going to try some drugs. I like to say to the young people, you know, it's like puberty. You're all going to go through it, eventually. And what happens is, at some point you kind of settle in. And you come to some accommodation, most of us do, with your relationship with substances and intoxicants. You say, certainly I'm never having Jose Cuervo again in my life, that's one thing for sure. And you know, I like red wine instead of white wine, or I'm a beer guy, maybe occasionally I'll smoke a joint. Most people come to some accommodation with how they party and their relationship with substances, both legal and illegal, as they get older. And if you don't, the warning was it could become a habit. And that can have negative consequences on your life. You might lose your job, your boyfriend might break up with you. You know, you don't want it to become a habit, because if it does, you might become physically dependent. And then the risk is one day down the line, you might accidentally take too much of your drug of choice and overdose on that drug. Of course, all across that continuum there were chances to intervene. Your friends would come to you and go, dude, you gotta back off, man. You gotta, you know, and your parents or your boss, maybe you get fired from a job. Maybe it gets to the point where you gotta go to rehab. There were chances to get off. If you got on the wrong path on your journey, you could get back on track. That's the traditional narrative, right? Not anymore. We'll never know what accommodation our boys might have come to in their lives with their relationship with substances, because they died of fentanyl poisoning early on, during their early experimental phase when they were just figuring it out. They didn't get a chance to make any more mistakes. They didn't get a chance to bump into the walls and figure out, I'm never doing that again, I'm going to moderate, I'm going to go over here. It's really dangerous out there at this point. So we have to start talking about the drug landscape now is more like a minefield than a path where you can get off on the wrong track. If you don't know what's going on in the world of drugs right now, you're at super high risk. Your next step could be your last step. Your first step could be your last. Because of these powerful synthetics like fentanyl and the fact that dealers are putting them in stuff without telling you. And in fact, lying about it in the case of counterfeit pills. Deliberately presenting, here's that Xanax you ordered, knowing full well it's not a Xanax. That's some scary stuff. So we don't really say, you know, I kind of say just say no, but I spell it K-N-O-W. We need to update the way we talk about this stuff. It's not about scare tactics, even though I'm kind of scaring you tonight. It's about being smart. It's about knowing what's going on. So I hope you'll research this stuff, you'll Google it, you'll tell your friends. Please go to songforcharlie.org. One of the things we've deliberately worked very hard on is to make it an online resource of factual information about what's happening. We call it Real Talk About Fake Pills. We have a Facts About Fentanyl page. We have a current data page that shows all kinds of trends. So Google it, use us as a resource. There's educational videos there. Take it upon yourselves to learn about this topic and tell everyone else you know. Here are the things we have our eyes on. We know for sure that fentanyl is in these drugs over here. We know that Adderall is on the streets these days that's made of meth. Again, here's this thing of the brainiacs in the drug business going, kids like study drug, Adderall, they pass it around, they share it. It's getting harder and harder to get the real ones, so let's get the stamps to make them look real. Adderall is basically speed, we'll make it out of meth. So if you're getting Adderall on Snapchat, you're taking meth. Now, is it in marijuana? Is it in vape pens? Unconfirmed. We're learning as we go. Things are very fluid. We're watching this very closely. Technically, we're told by toxicologists that it's very difficult to overdose on marijuana cigarette, the flower, bud, that has been dusted with fentanyl because fentanyl burns off faster than the flower. On the other hand, you've got law enforcement people saying, I've got evidence lockers that has bud with fentanyl on it. So either there's dealers out there giving it a shot and they don't know that it's kind of technically hard to get high on fentanyl if you smoke it that way. You can certainly vape it off a foil. That's what they do in the Tenderloin, right? So we know that there's been fentanyl seized, that there's been marijuana seized that has fentanyl on it. We have not confirmed an actual direct death from someone smoking a joint with fentanyl on it. And we've heard that it's in vape pens, but we haven't confirmed that yet. Doesn't mean it's not coming, though. Remember, it's a bitter mousetrap for drug dealers. So we have our eyes on this stuff. One of the things we're doing is we're behind National Fentanyl Awareness Day. Tuesday, May 10th, next week, there's over 200 corporate and non-profit sponsors. There's going to be a Senate resolution passed recognizing May 10th as National Fentanyl Awareness Day. The whole country is waking up to this because too many young people are dying. So I encourage you to go to this website, fentanylawarenessday.org also, learn there. The idea is to take one of these facts on May 10th. With 2 clicks, you can share that on social with your friends. So I'll close with this. It's going to take us a while to figure this out as a society. These 2 trends of counterfeiting or hiding these really potent synthetics in drugs is really new when you put those 2 things together. And it's going to take society for a while to catch up. And I think about it like the brush fires that we have here in California where, you know, imagine that the fire chief calls the mayor of the town and says, the fire is between us and your town. And it's a fast-moving fire. We're doing everything we can, but we're not going to get there in time. You have to save yourselves until we can get to you. That's the situation you're in here, kids. Until we figure this out, you guys need to take ownership of this problem. You need to tell everybody you know, you need to talk about it, research it, get smart about it, spread the word, make it uncool. Don't be afraid to call it out. If you see somebody selling pills on social media, bring it up, warn people against it, because you guys can make a big dent in this problem. We're not going to necessarily solve the drug crisis of over 100,000 drug deaths a year, but you know what the people in this room could do in the next 12 months? We could take that 7,000 drug deaths of high school and college-age kids, and we could bring that down to 1,000. We could save 5,000 or 6,000 lives in the next 12 months if everybody pulls together, and that's what we're hoping that you all will do. So I'm going to end with that. I really appreciate you guys' time. I hope you'll ask some questions, and we'll be around for a while. And thanks again for showing up tonight. There's nothing more important you could do with your evening than to come attend this right here tonight, so thank you for that.
just here to give you a couple words about mental health and why it intersects with fentanyl. People use drugs for many reasons, and we were gonna have this great Slido that brings out all the reasons, but I think we all know it can be everything. It can be boredom, it can be stress, it could be celebration, it could be anything. But a lot of times what brings people to use pills or powders is generally a mental health issue or stress or emotions that they can't necessarily handle on their own. And there's many reasons why people decide not to get counseling, and I want to bring those up tonight to share with you reasons why you should. So first, I have to say I feel a little awkward sitting up here. I've not lost a child to fentanyl, but unfortunately I have the really unfortunate privilege for other people in the community that have lost their kids. And I wrote down a little list of how many parents that I've talked to in the last couple of years. And there's 4 families I've talked to in La Honda and Pescadero. There's 3 families in Half Moon Bay, 1 off Skyline, 1 in Los Altos, 1 in South San Francisco, a young mom in San Bruno, and there's been 2 kids in San Carlos that have either died of overdose or poisoning. So this is right here and right now, and I want everybody in this room to know that you can get help. So what stops people? Why wouldn't you get mental health treatment? And I'll tell you the top 4 reasons I get time and time again. The first one I get is, and don't you can laugh if you want, but I saw someone and it didn't work out. And this happens a lot. You'll see a counselor and it wasn't a good fit. And I always think, would you marry the first person you dated? So you don't have to marry the first person you date in the therapy context either. Make sure that you visit a few, and it might not be the right fit the first time, the second time, third time, and that's normal, but don't give up. Second, and this happens a lot, especially in our area, I simply don't have time. And I usually think of it this way. If you're gonna drive and you find a curve in the road, what's the first thing that you do? You slow down. And let me tell you, mental health is a curve in the road. And when you hit that curve, you have to slow down. And when your kids are struggling with anxiety and depression, trauma, social fears, you have to slow their lives down. And there's nothing more important than getting that mental health treatment. And there's nothing more important. There's no sport that's more important. There's no appointment that's more important than making sure that we don't lose another kid in this area to suicide or overdose or poisoning. Third, and we get this unfortunately a ton of times, is it's too expensive, or I can't find anybody that will take my insurance. The other thing we get is I can't find anybody who will call me back. Well, that's One Life's mission, and thank you all in here. People have used our services, paid full fee. Those fees go directly to help people who cannot simply afford treatment or can't find somebody who's accessible. So that's what we do. You call us, we will get you in. We will call you back to the best of our ability within 24 hours. If you can't pay, we will help, and that's thanks to many people in this room that help us do that. The last one, and I think the most powerful, is that only the weak go to therapy. And I'm here to tell you that the wise seek counsel. That if you want to be a wise person on this planet, you need to have a counselor. You need to have people speak into your life to help you grow, to help you change. Life is hard. So please know that the weakness is not going. The strength is actually going to therapy. So please, for Colin, for Charlie, for all the teens that have died from suicide, from overdose, and of poisoning, make your way into that office, make that call to get the help that you need. We don't need anybody else suffering, especially silently. So slow down, don't give up, date a few therapists, find that right fit. We have you covered financially, and accepting help is an act of courage and strength. So thank you. Thank you for being here, and this is really meaningful to, I think, everybody here, and to keep every single kid in this room alive. Thank you so much for being here. I think we're going to move into the panel discussion, and Velvet should be coming out now to help us with our different questions that you guys have linked. Thank you so much.
Okay, so is there a way to tell if pills have been pressed by looking at them? Like the stamp looks off or crumbles easier than other pills?
The makers of these pills work really hard to make them look as real as possible. Most kids can't tell the difference. I have been told that a legitimate Oxy, Xanax often comes in a bar shape, but a legitimate Oxy is really hard to just break in half with your bare hands. But a pressed pill, you could break it in half. So you can't know for sure. Sometimes the fake ones seem to look a little more shiny, but I think the risk is so high that it almost begs the question. When I talk to DEA agents and others out there, I said, I think there's about 300 to 500 million counterfeit pills floating around the United States on any given day. And the answer I got back to that was, you could be low. There's a lot of pills floating out there. Your starting point has to be, if that pill didn't come out bottled that has 2 names on it, your doctor's and yours, you have to assume it's counterfeit. And if it's counterfeit, it's made with fentanyl.
Okay, this question's asked a few times. What does Narcan do? I always hear it in conversation regarding fentanyl.
And this would be a great question for the doctor, but Narcan is, it reverses an opioid overdose. It's really good at what it does. If someone has stopped breathing from an opioid overdose, I'm going to say this in layman's terms, Doc, it kind of knocks the opioid off the opioid receptors, okay? So, and the person will wake up if you get them in time. It's called a miracle drug. It really is incredible at reversing overdoses from an opioid. Okay. Having said that, a couple things you should know. Number one, fentanyl's strong, and any opioid might take multiple doses of Narcan to reverse it. The other thing is, depending on how much of the substance is floating around in the body, the person may wake up. And kids at a party might go, oh, God, we brought him back. We don't have to call our parents now. Wrong. You have to seek medical attention because the Narcan wears off and the opioid comes back onto the receptors and the person starts nodding out and stops breathing again. So always take someone for medical attention if you've administered naloxone or Narcan. Even if they wake up, they have to go to the ER. Okay, I'll take this opportunity to just say that in California we have what's called a Good Samaritan law. So you cannot get in trouble with the law if you call emergency responders when someone is in trouble from drugs or alcohol or overdose, in medical trouble. Even if there's drug paraphernalia, if you're intoxicated, you're exempt because you did the right thing and called authorities. Don't ever say, we're not going to call anybody because we don't want to get in trouble. That's not a thing in California.
How can I help my friends if they possibly get involved with fake pills or drugs?
Is it on? It's on. This is a real hard one. I think a lot of times, based on that slide that Ed shared, sometimes people that get involved in fake drugs aren't at the point where they're having a lot of consequences for addiction. And so many times the regular substance abuse treatment facilities aren't really equipped to deal with somebody who might be an occasional user. They're more equipped to deal with somebody who's way further down on the addiction spectrum. That being said, knowing that you're stepping on a landmine, I think you do as much as you can so that you feel like you have done everything you can just in case there is a bad outcome. So that means, yes, you talk to their parents. Yes, you make sure that they get help that they need, whether that's at school or that's at a clinic. You don't ever want to be in a position where you say to yourself, I wish I would have. It's a horrible, horrible way to feel. So you do drastic measures. It's that important.
And what can parents do?
Sorry, I just want to say too that unfortunately Colin's friends didn't know what he was doing. So if you're in a position like that, I know now, after Colin died, I went through his Snapchat. He had purchased cocaine 3 times. Once the end of July, beginning of August, and the night he died. And he knew after the second time he wrote, "I'm addicted." He probably didn't know that there was fentanyl in it, but if you're in that position, if you're in a position that you haven't told anyone, even your doctor, even who you can tell anything to, you can tell therapists anything and they don't have to go to your parents unless it's a life-threatening situation. So if you're as isolated as Colin was and not sharing it with your friends, if you've taken one of these drugs that Ed was talking about, thinking you were just taking a Xanax or something, and you really cannot stop, there's a good chance that you were taking something with fentanyl and you need to get help and stop, because the more you do it, the higher the chances that you're going to die.
What is the accuracy and availability of testing strips or other types of products that supposedly allow kids to test pills or powder before experimentation?
So I'll dive into that one. We had that in our film that we produced, and we're on a mission to make sure people have the right information so they can be safe. So let me give you the history of fentanyl test strips, okay? Fentanyl started in the United States 2013-14, showing up in the heroin supply. Makes sense, right? Fentanyl is an opioid, heroin is an opioid. You put a stronger, cheaper raw material in there, your customers are satisfied, and you make more money. But you can't control the dosing, and so people started dying. So the harm reduction business said, there are these test strips that are designed to test urine in the workplace to make sure that workers aren't under the influence of opioids on the job. What if we gave those out to heroin IV drug users? Makes a lot of sense to cook your shot, turn it into a liquid, and dip a test strip. It's like a pregnancy test or urine test. Dip a test strip in there and see if it contains fentanyl in there. Very valuable harm reduction technique. It works, okay? Now, fast forward to pills. Here's the problem with pills. Once you press that pill, the distribution of the fentanyl is locked in place. The only way to test a pill is to crush the entire pill, dissolve it in water at the proper ratio, then test it for fentanyl. If you get a negative result, you would then have to drink your dose. Not very practical. I mean, you got to really want to take that pill to go through all of that. But I will tell you, all responsible harm reduction people at any clinic, anywhere, safe injection site, they will tell you, you cannot test a part of a pill because of what's called the chocolate chip effect. You could break off a piece or take some shavings, a sample from the pill, and the fentanyl's in the rest of the pill. So, and if you take the rest of that pill, you could still die. So, what do you conclude from that? A couple of things. The most important thing is anybody who presents you with pills and says, my guy tests his pills, that's not a thing. If it's in tablet form, it has not been tested for fentanyl, period. Now, with cocaine, like heroin, if you shake the baggie up real good, you will probably distribute the fentanyl evenly enough that the sample you take will be detected by the fentanyl test strip. Okay, so the idea that you have to test a whole gram of cocaine, well, you could just test a sample. Let me give you an example. There's an organization in Southern California that gives out fentanyl test strips on college campuses. In the last 6 months, they gave out 4,000 fentanyl test strips and they put a QR code on them. 90 positive results for fentanyl on college campuses in Southern California in the last 6 months. And since cocaine is often a social drug, that's not just maybe 90 lives changed, that could be 180 lives saved, right? So none of this is foolproof. Remember that harm reduction techniques are not harm elimination techniques. They're designed for people who are typically, as Susie said, further along in the substance use continuum than the casual occasional user. So you can test powders by taking a sample and dissolving them in liquid and getting a result. Pills, not a thing. And remember, if you got it from the street, it's got fentanyl in it, so you're testing, you're asking a question you already know the answer to, in my opinion.
Many teens won't listen to their parents. What do you recommend the best way to engage them in this important topic?
You can't give up talking about it, and you can't stop talking about it, and it's difficult, and they don't want to talk about it. I think the best times to talk to a teen are usually when they're horizontal in bed late at night, or when you're driving and there's no eye contact. So those are the two best times to get anything across to a teen. But it's hard, and it's hard, but I think the power is in the information. It was wonderful meeting with Ed and knowing, I don't know all these details about fentanyl. It's a new drug for all of us. But I think first so that you know, and then sharing that information when they're in bed or in the car.
With no eye contact. I will say that, and I just read a study that Stanford did about how teenagers actually, they've studied their brains and they will turn off their mother's voice at a certain point. And Colin's friends know that he was well into turning my voice off, probably when he was 14. And Rob and I told him again and again, there's this thing called fentanyl out there. You cannot put a pill in your body. If you're gonna smoke pot, at some point, you know, that's better than, but do not put a pill. We didn't say don't take cocaine. You kind of like, so, but I also, after he died, went through all of his messages and there's like Charlie Brown, like me sending him every article that I ever saw about fentanyl in pills. And I wouldn't put it past him. I don't know for sure, but I wouldn't put it past him if he went, I cannot take a pill, but I haven't been cocaine hasn't been talked about, so I'll stay safer and do that. So I think also friends have to talk to friends because they're gonna listen to their peers so much more. And I think one of the slides that Ed had is, I mean, drugs are, you know, they're always gonna be out there, but watch out for each other and make sure, and if you know someone who's trying something, make sure they have this information and that they're not alone.
Can I jump in with one more too? This is an important question, and it goes both ways too, right? So how do kids approach their parents? And parents, how do you receive, you know, kind of a reach out from your kids? I think it's important right now, and actually in a weird way we have an opportunity right now because the playing field is level. Everybody is stressed out. With COVID and everything else, it's okay, kids, to go to your mom and dad and say, look, I'm struggling. I got decisions to make, it's weighing on me, you know, I don't know what to do. And parents, you know, the days of being like, oh, come on, buck up. Well, I walked uphill to school both ways in the snow. Those days are over. Our kids today are more stressed out. I have a theory that they're the most stressed out generation in human history because our brains did not evolve to process the data deluge that we all face, but especially young people have never known any different, of information coming at them 24/7, 365 through social media, amplifying every single social pressure that any of us ever experienced by a factor of 100. So when your kids come to you and say, I'm stressed out, I might need help, I might need to slow down, I might need to think again about that reach college and maybe go over here to this college over here. These are welcome conversations. These are indicators that there's an opportunity for a dialogue there. Because two things are not going to go away in your kids' generation: stress and synthetic drugs. And so we have to take the synthetics off the playlist and find out and help our kids find healthy coping strategies. That's not a nice to have anymore. That is a critical life skill. Like, we don't teach our kids how to swim so they win gold medals. We teach them how to swim so they don't drown. We gotta start teaching kids, and you guys gotta help each other kids to cope with your very real stress, because you can't solve real problems with fake pills or other drugs. You gotta find real solutions. So that's my rant.
All right, so this is going to be the last question, but like they said that they offered to stay up here and you guys can come up and personally ask. But this then goes into your into your final slide of call to action. So this question is, are there proposed bills or new criminal laws we can support to help stop the fentanyl epidemic? And then basically, what can we do to stop it?
There are going to be new bills. I believe there's going to be one actually introduced tomorrow. Senator Cornyn, I think, is introducing one. The Fentanyl Awareness Day will be recognized at the Senate level, possibly a congressional resolution as well. But these things take time to flow through the system. And the political climate right now, it's very difficult to prosecute drug dealers. We've been trying to control the supply of drugs for, we've been fighting the war on drugs officially for 50 years, and there's still heroin on the street. So I kind of land on the side of demand reduction, that just say no, K-N-O-W, and take it on ourselves. That other stuff is kind of above our pay grade, and it's going to take a long time. One more of my kind of Johnny Cochran analogies here. The politics and the change and the passing laws and all that kind of stuff, I look at that as like the ground game. That takes a long time, that's a slog. There's competing agendas, and it's going to take a long time. In the meantime, people are dying. What we need to do is be like the Air Force. We need to carpet bomb everybody we know with the information to buy the people that are doing the hard work of the legislation time to get it done. That's kind of more the sense of urgency that I have about telling everyone you know about what's going on. That's the most important thing you can do. You can support all the legislation you want. The real results come from spreading the word. And what are their calls to action to you have?
So I surround myself with counsel. I can tell you Ed has been an amazing partner for us. It's been just over 8 months since we lost Colin. And I asked him earlier today when did he really start doing this? How long had Charlie been gone? And he said it was about 8 months. I don't know that Liz and I are going to take on the battle cry that Ed has so valiantly given us, but we're going to help. So you're asking, what can you do, right? And I'm hoping do I need perfect. So this will be available through the Slido app, I believe. The first thing we want you to do is take the pledge. Help us stop this from happening, at least within your sphere of influence and their sphere of influence, especially the kids that are here. And you guys that knew Colin, do it for him, right? Take the pledge. Ask for help. I've known Susie for 10 years before she ever started One Life. We have been friends, and our journey with our own kids, we were together. Now One Life is here doing this for us. So reach out, get a hold of them, get help, talk to your parents talk to your kids, teenagers talk to your friends, and spread the word. So Ed and his foundation have done amazing work around fentanyl awareness, and we have the first Fentanyl Awareness Day coming in 6 days, May 10th. And you saw what he asked. Take a snapshot of one of the elements that we want to spread in this message and send it out. And be the nerd, but send it out and get this word out and help us spread this message. And it's going to happen every year. This is the first. We wish we had never met to have to spread this message, but we did, and we will. And finally, donate. Anything you can do to help us. We are going to split that evenly between Song for Charlie and One Life. And so everything that gets raised from here on out will go to these two foundations. And in addition, we've been very lucky to have friends and family who have already donated to Collins Memorial Foundation. And we've been pretty fortunate in the amount of money that we've been able to raise through that. So we're going to start by giving each Song for Charlie and One Life $50,000 out of Collins Memorial Fund. We know, to Ed's point, to Susie's point, this is a journey. We're not going to solve this today, but we can start today. And you can start today. Feel what we're feeling to the best of your ability, because you don't want this. So finally, and in conclusion, I want to, Liz and I really want to thank the Carlmont Journalism team here. They have been amazing. Please give them a round of applause. We especially want to thank Ed and Susie. We couldn't stand here today. We couldn't have you here if it weren't for them. And we can't do it without your help. Thank you.